Hi, and welcome to the very first This Week in cmBuilder. As many of you know, we push a product update every single Monday, which will include new features and general process improvements for the platform. This week, we have a few new features to add to the excavation tool, which I'll dive into in a little bit more detail. We can see in the site mobilization milestone of this scenario, we have a slab on grade over a gently sloped site. It's not majorly sloped, but does have a bit of a hump in the middle, which we'll use to demonstrate the first feature. So we can flip over to the next milestone, which is going to be the strip of the concrete, and go into 2D, excavation, and add a cut. Whenever creating any sketch, cut, fill, or any polyline resource for that matter, I always recommend working in 2D just to avoid that distortion from the perspective of the field of view. I can create that polyline, and you can see right off the bat, we now have the option to cut to terrain, which is what we'll be demonstrating. So previously, you've always had to define the elevation of the bottom of the cut or the elevation of the top of the fill, where now we can do it as an offset from the topographic surface. So for this example, where we're going to strip the slab on grade on site, we're just going to cut 400 millimeters down all over the entire footprint of that cut. The second feature I'll be highlighting is the ability to change the color of individual cuts and fills. So for this example, for the stripping of the slab on grade, I can change that bottom color to a slightly darker brown, maybe just to represent some moist topsoil under the slab on grade. And then for the edges, we can turn that into the map satellite view. And that's basically just going to project the image from the satellite down the edge of the excavation and make it look a little bit more like concrete. So we can select done and just see the result of that cut, which looks like that concrete's just been stripped back over the building footprint. We can then flip into the next milestone to jump into our tip, which is going to be using the 3D geometry from the imported model to create excavation cuts. So for this example, we're just going to show the structural model to use that geometry. Of course, there wouldn't actually be any foundation elements in the bulk excavation stage, so that's why we're just going to go into the foundation and temporarily show. That way it won't affect the simulation, but we can still use the geometry for the excavation cuts. We can then go to add operation and cut. You can just start the excavation at the bottom of the hole to generate the sketch plane, and you can select project from the side sheet here. There's a few different ways to select the geometry. We could turn off the map so that we could see the whole model from every angle. I prefer to actually just change the camera view to down beneath the excavation, and we can hover over different geometry as to see what we're selecting. Once I select one of these pad footings, I can immediately see that the profile of the pad footing is projected onto the sketch plane. Another option we have is to apply an offset to that profile. So I select offset and then the profile. I can either make it a bit larger or smaller, maybe to accommodate for formwork or overpour. And then we can just confirm that. So that's going to be the general footprint of the excavation. Once we've created that, we can then define the depth of the excavation, similar as before, but we can now select the bottom elevation from the 3D viewer by using this icon on the right. Perfect. So now we've selected the bottom of the footing, and we see that cut defined entirely from the 3D viewer. We can also apply slope to the walls if we choose, depending on what your use case is. We can then hide that structural foundation just to see the result of what we've done. Another use case of coloring the excavation per cut is if you're wanting to use it for visualization purposes. So if you're wanting to break the pad footing pours down into phases, or if you're just wanting to highlight something in your final presentation simulation, you can do that, which I've set up the remainder of the pad footings in this simulation. So we can see if this were to be phase 1, we could highlight them blue, phase 2 is green, phase 3 is yellow. As mentioned, as well as cut based off terrain, we have fill to grade, which is a majorly requested feature and is great to have in the platform. We can see if we go into maybe the pour L1 columns, we can then backfill the site back up to grade. And we do that by just creating a fill, going into 2D, and just sketching around that site. The great thing about fill to grade is you don't have to be too careful about the edge of the excavation because you're only filling to the grade. It's just going to fill the space in and won't come up with a lip around the perimeter of your fill. You can then fill to terrain, and we can change the color to whatever we like. I'll make it the satellite view for this just to demonstrate. We're in a slab on grade, let's say. Of course, you can get a little bit more creative and either use different image projections if you're wanting to do landscaping or a level 1 architectural plan, depending on what your use case is.